we were at the Hyatt House in Chicago, and there was, I was active at the time in the National Speakers Association, and in fact was one of the bigwigs. And they asked me to judge a speaker's showcase, where speakers would come up and do 10 minutes worth of material, and then sit down, and we had to judge them. And there were about 30 or 40 speakers. And when you've heard 10 speakers, no matter how good it tends to get a little bit boring.
Yeah.
So when one speaker is on, they would mic up the next speaker, and he would have a neck mic, and he was shown where the on-off switch was. And this speaker was not familiar with neck mics or any kind of mics for that example. Or
Yeah.
He left his mic on and turned to one of the judges and said, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." And the next thing you hear are noises coming out of the men's washroom. And then you hear him speaking, and he is now psyching himself up. And he's looking in the mirror, apparently, and saying, "You can do this. You can be great. You're a wonderful speaker. I can do this. Okay, let's go." And he comes running out the door, and the audience gave him a big hand. And he had no idea what it was about.
That's so hilarious. Yeah, but I'm sure that's a process. If you're a speaker, that's one of you got to get yourself psyched up for a presentation, you know?
Well, I remember in New Orleans, it was in the late 60s. Earl Nightingale was the keynote speaker for the American Bankers Association convention.
Yeah.
Now, these are all of the presidents of all of the big banks. There's a lot of power there, you know.
Yeah.
And I was there as kind of his assistant, helping him, whatever. And we were having a typical New Orleans breakfast, and they were serving clams on the half shell with vodka chasers. Now, this is back in the 60s.
Yeah, sure.
Carl just took one look at those clams, and he started slamming them down. And,
Yeah.
and finally, by the time he was ready to talk, he started looking a little bit green. And about 2 or 3 minutes before he was scheduled to talk, he turned to me, he says, "Ron, do you know my talk?" I said, "Sure, why?" He says, "Because you're going to give it." And with that, he jumped up and ran to the washroom and apparently got violently sick. And everybody looked at me saying, "You're going to replace Earl Nightingale?"
I'm sure you did not, Ron.
Well, it's where I learned how to deal with fear and how to overcome a powerful audience. Just look at the least among them in terms of how smart they are, and focus on that individual, and you'll be great.
Yeah, we got Bart Didden on there. Hi, Bart. How are you doing?
He's still logging in.
Okay.
So it looks, Alan, it looks like we have the majority of our registrations have at least started to log in. So,
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started?
that was easy. So, Katie, do you want to do the introduction, or?
Sure.
Then I think we're ready to go.
Alan isn't going to say anything.
Sure. I mean, I'd be glad to say something. You know, I mean, we
When
are.
is lunch served?
We have as our premier speaker here, Ron Davis, who is famous in the industry for everything. And so this is a really great talk today. You know, he's going to tell us how the market is, whether you want to buy, whether you want to sell. It should be interesting. Values are, and just in general, you know, this is an industry guru that is going to let us know how things are out there. So with that, I would love to, I'll turn it over to Katie if you'd like to say something.
I think,
And
I
I'll turn
think
it to
Alan,
Ron.
I think Alan, you said everything. I can't add much to that.
Okay.
But she's going to try and talk for 15 minutes.
But, well, yeah,
I agree. Alan said everything, Katie. Let's just get started or we'll be here all morning doing introductions.
Okay, you got it.
Oh, this is wonderful. Hey, there's my picture. That guy looks a little bit younger than I do, but not too bad for an old man. I want to thank you. This is like coming home for me. Alan, I know for sure you were at my first talk in Ohio, and that would have been in the early 80s, I think.
Yeah.
And they were in downtown hotels, and we had some good times then. And it's good to be back, even virtually, with you and for you. So, with that being said, Dale, can you punch the slide button? Okay, as a dealer or anybody in the alarm industry, you are faced with a lot of challenges. And I'm going to kind of go off script. This is something
Yeah,
that
please do, Ron.
was a little bit afraid of, and that is going off script at least one or two times. But there's some things going on in the industry in the last 30 to 45 days that have caused me to look at the industry and to say for certain that there are some major changes coming down the pike. And whether you are a buyer, a seller, or just a doer, all of these changes are going to lead to some major challenges for you. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the do-it-yourself phase entered into the industry with some kind of strength, and it's become a popular method of installation. I just read this morning that sales of do-it-yourself product have increased substantially in the last year, and that probably is partially as a result of the people being home with COVID. And people have been knocking the door knockers for a long period of time, challenging them in the courts, doing all of the things that they think are necessary in order to protect their businesses. And for some period of time, I've defended these marketers because I was active in the Direct Selling Association, and at the time, which was the 60s going into the 70s, that group was the only group standing between legislation to totally outlaw these people and perhaps knocking down the advantages they have. And the do-it-yourself, or excuse me, the door knockers, as we call them, really direct selling people who have learned how to do the things that people have to do in order to make sales, in order to survive. And back when I first was involved with them, there were magazine salespeople, encyclopedia salespeople, Bible salespeople. Southwestern Publishing Company was one of the biggest publishing companies in the entire industry, the publishing industry. And all of their Bibles and dictionaries were sold into the home by direct salespeople. Now it's security systems and solar systems. And for whatever it is taking away from the traditional alarm dealer, it is adding to the growth of the alarm industry. And that growth, excuse me, that growth has challenged us because little by little, there are $10 central stations doing monitoring for do-it-yourself installations. There are all sorts of methods of communicating issues or problems, not the least of which is the telephone calling a neighbor, which goes back to the 60s in terms of selling. And what has happened is it has, to a degree, not a large degree, kind of neglected the traditional method of selling systems, at least in the home, and automatically signing up the customer you've just created to central station monitoring, which has always been a significant portion of the business. The problem is that it is starting to take away from some of the traditional industry. And in so doing, that and the do-it-yourself market and some of the other large marketers are finding that getting financing from the banks is a little more difficult than it had been in the past. Getting financing actually from anywhere is more difficult. And there is a problem with getting financing if you're in a business going forward. And something happened a couple of weeks ago that really got my attention. We're representing a fairly significant alarm company, and it had about 400,000 of recurring monthly revenue. That makes it a fairly big company. And they had their own central station. And we started taking it to various potential buyers. We had meetings with a lot of them. And one of the biggest buyers in the industry, and one of the most ethical and reputable buyers in the industry, made a offer to this company, which was for approximately 32 times recurring monthly revenue. And they said, and of course, we'll take the central station and hire everybody in it, but they didn't want to pay for it. So what started out as a search for the right buyers who were willing to pay, I thought at least, in the mid to upper 30s, we found a really good buyer who had decided that the value of the recurring monthly revenue was not the same today as it was a year ago, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. And as I looked around the industry, there were not very many companies in the recurring monthly revenue business that were sold for a multiple of 38 or 40 or 42, which had become fairly popular during the last few years. We had reached up to the 40s as recently as last year. So when there is that drastic a change from what it had been to what it is now, it kind of calls your attention to it. I didn't know if it was an aberration or it was something that was going to be indigenous to the industry. And as I look around and I've started talking to a lot more of the financial community and buyers of all sorts, what I've discovered is that the banks are still lending money to good companies. They're still lending money for companies who have good business plans. They're still lending money for companies that have good management teams and know how to build businesses. And the same is holding true in the central station business. It used to be there were 30 or 40 really good regional central stations around the country. And then all of a sudden it became something that a lot of people got into without perhaps understanding all of the issues involved in running a quality central station. And the multiples for Central Station have always been somewhere in the 16 to 20 range, 20 at the high side, 14 to 16 times on the lower side. And depending on how badly a buyer wanted to uh, acquire a seller of a Central Station, or for that matter, an alarm company, they did so and changed the statistics just a little bit upward. So we have examples of deals being done in the 30s or upper 30s, not in the 40s. And the first thing that most people who sell their companies ask us is, well, what are the multiples? And it's not as though the multiples have become a stable criteria that you can depend upon. They change from region to region, from types of companies that are being financed, all of the things that are necessary for a good decision to be made are usually made based on a number excuse me, a number of variables that need to be looked at. Next slide. New technology is arriving every day, and keeping up with it and learning how to use it can be as challenging to you and your employees as it is to everybody else. But the reality is, if you check your mailbox, you'll find that a lot of the mail that you get, whether it's emails or actually snail mail, uh, it's new products, new technology, new ideas that can enable both integrators as well as sales companies to do a better job for their customers. Now, COVID-19 has affected not only customers, but also your employees, perhaps changing how you do business. Take a look at Zoom. I started to tell Dale a few minutes ago that we've been out of the flying business and traveling business for 16 months. And when the year was over, I went through our financials and I discovered that our Alan, do you think you might shut off your microphone?
Sure.
Thanks. Uh, and what we were looking for was what happened to our sales expense, particularly T&E. Now, T&E for our company has been anywhere from a couple $100,000 to 1 year, pretty close to $500,000. And then last year, we did almost the same amount of business, and we had, I think, $1,000 of travel expenses. And that was having some meals with different dealers around the Chicago area, and no additional traveling, but doing business exactly as we're doing it today, which is a Zoom call. It's easier. It's every bit as effective. I certainly have your attention, and I appreciate it. But it's also a way of evolving into what is happening in businesses all over the world. Take a look at that real estate in your communities, and you'll find that housing is going up, but downtown office buildings are going down. Shopping centers are struggling to figure out new ways to bring customers into the shopping centers. So COVID-19 has not only affected how we do business, but it's affected the entire business landscape. Next slide, please. So what else will the future bring? Well, considering that these challenges and many others are going to be coming up, you may decide that now is the time to exit the business. I'm not suggesting it, I'm not endorsing it, I'm simply saying that many people will be considering it. People who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, who have had a long career in the industry are going to start thinking about, do they want to continue this, not knowing fully where the industry is going or what products they may be selling or even how they will be selling it. So considering these challenges, you may decide it's time to do it. And the following are 6 options to think about. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I think the first option is not one you would pursue, and that's liquidation. Sell everything at once, sell all your assets, close your business. If you're a one-man show, it may be your only option. But if you have no one to take over the company, it may be a reasonable option. Next slide. You can sell everything over time as you bring in accounts or as you need capital. You could sell off a tranche of accounts. But all of that will only do one thing, and that is give you a far smaller amount of money for your company and for your life's work. So don't wait for a windfall from selling the business. Either if you decide that that's what you want to do it the right way. Next slide. A lot of people will turn over the business to family members. They will sell it to family members. And they expect that family members would take care of what they call their baby. Well, those members might not have the same drive and determination as you. They might not have the proper skills to run a business successfully. Succession planning is both time consuming and might not make all of your family members happy. I was having lunch with a very successful dealer in the Midwest, very large company, probably worth in the neighborhood of 15, $20 million, maybe even higher than that. And he had children in the business. And I said to him, well, why are we having this conversation? You already have people in your business that I'm sure could probably run it if you decided to take a leave from the business. And he just looked at me and he said, Ron, that's the worst decision I ever made. Demanding pretty much that my kids come into the business. For 2 of them, it was anathematic because they wanted to really do other things, one into show business, another into the clergy. And I was making them come in and run parts of my business. So a lot of times it's just not the right things. And I can only urge you, if it's not right for some or all of your family members to join the business, don't push it. It probably will come back to bite you. Next slide. You could sell the company to employees or managers. And that's usually a thought that occurs second to the thought of, are there any family members that I could sell it to? And then the question comes up, how much is your company worth? Well, that means you have to do an evaluation. You have to have somebody come in and do what is called due diligence on your company. And we'll talk a little more about that in a few minutes. But what it comes out with is you may have a fair price for your company. And I remember talking to one woman who had a nice sized company, about 200,000 of recurring monthly revenue, and all of their employees were beloved by this owner. And the owner said to me, well, I'd like to figure out a way to sell it to my employees. And we figured out the rough value of the company, and it was going to be around $3 or $4 million. And I said, do they have the money to or the capability of financing that amount of money? She said, no, I was going to finance it myself. And I said, where are you going to get the money to do that? She said, well, why do I need money to finance a company? And I started to list some of the reasons why, not the least of which is the liability you're extending to people who have never been owners of company. There's a reason that some people are not owners of companies, and perhaps they shouldn't be. So we talked a little bit more about it, and this owner said, "Well, what do you suggest?" I said, "Look, why don't you do this? If you're going to sell your company, let's see what's out there. Let's write up a prospectus and mail it out to prospective buyers and see whether or not there's some level of interest in this." And boy, we got a level of interest that we didn't expect. And the offers came in and they were higher than what we anticipated. So I said to this owner, how do you feel about selling to your employees now? And it was a lady, said, not very well, because now I'm not sure if they can handle something this size, and I'm not sure how they would finance it. So I suggested, well, why don't you have a meeting with one or two of these people that you have in mind to sell the company to, and tell them what the valuation of your company is, and see if they have any interest in owning it. And when she did that, she found out this was not the way to go. And she retained us to come in and help sell the company, which we're in the process of doing now. Next slide, please. You can sell to a competitor. You can trust him or her to carry on your business. By the way, these little pictures that we have in all of our slides, our nickname is the Graybeards, the old timers, and we got a whole bunch of photographs from the 1920s and 30s, and we use those in all of our mailings and on all of our slides, and we just get a big kick out of them. Occasionally, our advertising guy will put my head on one of these characters, and nobody will ever pick up on it. But selling to a competitor, back to selling to a competitor, is he only interested in your customer list and financial information? Will he close the business, and will your former employees be out of a job? And if so, is that okay with you? And so forth. And that's not to suggest that we won't go to your competitors also, because quite frankly, they are the most likely to understand your business, to understand the value that we and others may have placed on your business, and be interested in running it and carrying on what you've built in a professional manner. But there's only one way to find that out, and that's to go to these competitors and have in this case, a business broker, uh, not just tell your story, but also do in effect what a real estate broker does, show the qualities of the home that you're selling. Next slide. Put your company on the market using a business broker you can trust. And people have asked me over the years, how do you know if it's a business broker you can trust, or if it's a business broker that has the talent, and even if it's a business broker that's knowledgeable about the industry? And I'm not going to make a case for our company. I think what we do is pretty well known in the industry. And if it's not, go to our website and you can read a lot of case histories of things that we've done. But typically, a broker will accurately evaluate your company, or get somebody who is capable of accurately evaluating your company, get you the most money. And that's a fairly significant issue, because almost always a buyer doesn't want to pay what a seller wants to get. Excuse me. We have to find a medium between the two that makes both parties feel pretty good about the transaction. Assure employees that they will be taken care of and get a win-win for everyone. Excuse me. And a win-win for everyone means that the buyer is satisfied that he's paid a fair price, and the seller is satisfied that he has got from the buyer a price that represents a fair price for everyone. Now, can you always count on this happening? The answer is not always. Market conditions may change where you are. Issues may change. A company that's in a small town, I apologize. A company that's in a small town that doesn't have a large market is probably not worth as much as a larger company in a bigger market. A company that has an owner that does most of the selling is probably a company that can't do all of the things that a larger company can do and may have made mistakes in building the company. So not only get an evaluation of your company, make sure you get the most money and everybody wins. Next slide. Only you can decide what is best for you and your family and employees. And the best advice I can give you is to prepare your company as though you were going to sell it tomorrow, no matter how you determine the best way to proceed. And I don't mean to get maudlin or be a downer, but I've had maybe a dozen situations over the last 20 years where owners have put in their wills. If something happens to me before I'm ready to take care of this, make sure you call so-and-so. In many cases, or at least in a dozen cases, it was our company was named. And I get a call from a widow or a widower who is ill prepared to take care of a company and doesn't know what to do. Well, what we make sure is if they want to sell the company is to ensure that the legacy and the amount of money that the original owner thought the company was worth, if it was realistic, is pretty important. And we do the best we can to get that amount of money for the potential buyer. Next slide. Is there financing for acquisitions? The answer is yes. They may not be the same banks that were there a few years ago. They may not be the same number of people out there. But right now, private equity is almost huge in our industry, not because they want to be in the industry, but because our industry is part of a much larger category of businesses. And this is a cash flow business if you're in the recurring monthly revenue business. So they understand cash flow businesses. They finance major companies. Right now, we're representing a company with $3.5 million of recurring monthly revenue. And the only people who can pay the kind of money necessary to buy that size company are looking at that as a minor investment. $300-400 million is peanuts to many of these private equity investors. Known investors, people that we know who are either in the industry or the financing business, that's a pretty good way to do it. But I'm going to kind of branch off here and talk about searchers. I'm sure the majority of people that come to our meetings and see this slide, they wonder what is a searcher and how does that fit into the scheme of things. Well, a number of years ago, a group of students, I believe it was at Harvard, it may have been Yale, got together and tried to raise a good deal of money to buy a company. And one of the investors was a financial guy who worked at an alarm company. In fact, I can tell you the company, it's kind of interesting. It was Smith Alarm down in Dallas. And that was at the time, one of the largest alarm companies in the industry. I was consulting with them at the time, so I kind of know a little bit about this. These group of students went to George Smith III and said, look, we represent some private equity investment. My time is up. What was that, Dale? Never mind. They went to George Smith and said, we've got a lot of investors behind us. We can pay you a very fair price for what your company is worth. And George was at about that point in his life where he was ready to sell, and he did. And the group of searchers took over and built that business to a much larger company. Now, that started a category of financial people known as searchers who sought out private equity to back them. And by private equity, I'm talking about companies and or people that had investors who were investing in particular types of industries or businesses. So the searchers would approach a group of investors, offer to take on the job of searching for the right company. Typically, it was a company that had revenues between 10 and probably $50 million a year, had EBITDA, which is essentially profitability, of at least $2 million a year. And those are the kinds of business they wanted to invest in. We've done probably half a dozen deals with searchers. All of their acquisitions are successful and doing well. And we now have maintained a database of virtually all of the active searchers in the United States, or at least that we know of or anybody else knows about. We constantly direct mail these searchers with different opportunities. They get our normal weekly mailing, which identifies all potential sellers that we're representing. And then on occasion, we will reach out to a select group of searchers. Excuse me again. That we know what they're looking for, we know who the targets are, and we call the target acquisitions and let them know we're representing, we would like to represent them and work out transactions with searchers who are investors who take an active role in the management of the company. They build the company, they have access to additional dollars that they can get to provide additional financing. Banks and other financial institutions, as well as private investors, are always good sources for financing. And yes, there are plenty of it. I believe I read this number may not be accurate, but there was at least $500 billion of dollars ready for investment throughout the United States and Canada, it was North America primarily, and they are looking for opportunities. And when you when you think about it, it's an opportunity for an investor to buy a local business or get involved with the local business. It's an opportunity to create additional sources of taxes for the community, jobs for people in the community. And it's one of those things where everybody succeeds or at the very least, everybody is happy with their decision to be one. So next slide, please. How is today's market? In the alarm industry, I don't know. Well, that's a silly statement, I do know. But I'm not sure I understand exactly all the ways and all the pressures that are being applied in the industry. I know we have buyers out there that will pay somewhere in the mid-30s or in the mid to upper teens for a wholesale monitoring company. But the real market seems to be in the integrator market. There are a demand, not just from the companies like ADT or Cerebus or any of the others out there. There are a number of international businesses that are looking to establish in the United States, and they have money to acquire businesses. If you look at, boy, am I drawing a blank on the name all of a sudden. Large integrator company in Chicago, it'll come to me. And they've acquired an integrator virtually every month in the last 4 years and have taken away a pretty significant number of the larger integrators out there. And typically a company that is acquiring integrators will pay upwards of 4, 5, 6, 7 times recurring profitability or recurring EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, amortization, and something else in there. And they are willing to pay it. They look at the numbers, they know exactly how they're going to make their investment back and profitability back. And they want to know how I can capitalize on the market now. So they're waiting in line to get integrators to at least talk with them. Next slide. So what's going on in the industry? Well, do-it-yourself PERS, your central station, alarm.com, door knockers, all of those are putting pressure on companies to sell. And you would think with all that pressure that the multiples would be going up and not in some cases decreasing. I think they will stabilize this year in the mid to upper 30s for larger companies. I don't think the days of 40 times recurring monthly revenue are here today or will come back this year, possibly not ever. But more importantly, for longevity, the buyers are now more prepared to pay what is necessary and walk away from situations that do not provide a good opportunity for profitability on their investment. Next slide. Due diligence is a process where trained accountants will come in and look at your business. Typically, they look at monitoring agreements. They will analyze recurring monthly revenue. They'll check for tax issues and liens on your business. They will look at the books and records of your company, and they will become very familiar with all of the operational issues that you have. In other words, they're going to know pretty close to exactly what it is that the company has and what it is worth. And we find so often that alarm dealers and recurring monthly revenue alarm dealers don't know as much as they think they do about their own business. We have a saying that you will never know your business as well as you do on the day you sell your company. And we see this happening over and over again. We are now kind of leading the industry in looking at what the values are of a company, and we don't rely just on our own experiences and opportunities. We rely on people who do due diligence. So for many companies that we're representing, we will pay to have professionals such as the name on the bottom of this slide, Reitman Consulting Group, come in and look at your company, review all of the things they would review if your company were actually for sale. And then collectively, we come up with a reasonable price in order to make sure that everybody is getting the proper story. Next slide. Everything should be clear and in writing. Customer contracts set the expectations of all. The completeness of what is being done or not being done, who is doing it, how long is it being done, who pays and how much do they pay. What happens if things go wrong? These are all keys to making sure that your company is well prepared to be sold. Next slide. They do an analysis of recurring monthly revenue, and the principal asset in a recurring monthly revenue transaction is the contracts and the recurring monthly revenue. Customers are paying and paying on time. There's relatively low attrition. Attrition should at least be under 10%, if not lower. Next slide, please. They look at tax returns, financial statements, central station reports, central station agreement, leases, and other key agreements. In other words, they look at every aspect of your business and they determine exactly what the value is. Next slide. They will look at the books and records and they will check for unpaid taxes and liens, judgment liens, any litigation, insurance claims. They're very vigorous, they're very honest, and they're very real. So, so when this happens to your company, look at these people as though you're your best friends, because they can be your best friends. They will help you to put your best foot forward. Next slide, please. Operational issues are also looked at pretty carefully. Briefly, phone line issues, communication issues, anything having to do with taxes, anything having to do with loans and so forth. These are all issues that are looked at. Next slide. How do you avoid due diligence issues? Simply is run your business like a business. Don't think that just because you started a business and you think you can run it all yourself, take a look at what accountants do out there, or what lawyers do out there, and have them help you run your business like a business. Consider having a board of directors, people who know what running a business is like and will come in once or twice a year and advise you on major issues. Next slide. And that, with this, my coughing and increasing, is the presentation that I had planned for you. There are a couple of little surprises we've got here. Our company has grown. We have 4 partners in the company now, and we just added the 4th. And that is Kelly Bond, who is well known in the industry, has had 25 years of working with dealers and helping them prepare businesses for sale. Kelly, you want to say hello to everyone? I think you're on mute. There you go.
Yes, greetings, everyone. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces and familiar names that I probably haven't talked to in a little bit, but I'm very excited to be a part of this group and have jumped right in and love getting back into the M&A world in our industry. So I'm very happy to be here and look forward to connecting with some of you that it's been a little bit since we've talked.
And thank you, Kelly. And it's a great addition that you bring to the company and a diverse group. The first thing she did is you have to get rid of the graybeards thing. And then Katie piped up, yes, you do. And then my wife Beverly also added her 2 cents. So we are changing the name to Just Davis Mergers, and that's going to be our logo. I haven't got any idea what we're going to put in the circle, but it probably won't be the old man anymore. So we'll be changing that. Next slide, Dale. I do this for anyone who sits in on any of our seminars. I wrote a book. It's about 250 pages. Gives you a lot of insights into everything that we have seen in putting together deals, good, bad, or otherwise. And I'd be happy to, instead of selling you the book, I'd be happy to send you a complimentary signed copy mailed to your door at no charge. Just give us a call or drop us a note, and the email address and telephone number is there. We'll get it out to you right away. Next slide. This book here is one I wrote after the start of the deal, and it contains articles that I've written for security sales, put into a different perspective of the greatest ideas that some of the greatest thinkers have had in the industry. We get a lot of calls for this. All profits from the sale of that book goes to the Shriners Hospital in Memphis, Danny Thomas's legacy, and it all goes to help kids who have terrible illnesses. And we've donated quite a bit of money as a result of that. So if you'd like that book, it's $15. Just send us a check or a credit card. And by the way, the name is St. Jude. That's the hospital we donate to. And we'll send you out your copy as quickly as possible, and I'll autograph it if you'd like. If you don't want me to, that's fine also, but I think you're going to enjoy it. And it's a pretty good idea to pass around to your key employees. It has great ideas for managers. And with that, Dale, do we have time for questions? Dale?
There's always time for questions for you.
Okay. All right, anybody got a question? Wow, what a good looking group.
Hey, Ron, I've got a question.
Sure.
Are you seeing a multiple being paid on things such as fire equipment inspection services? Beyond even just fire alarm, for companies that do, sprinkler system testing and fire extinguisher testing, things like that?
Brian, that's a great question. And I'm sure glad you asked it, because it opens up a category of recurring monthly revenue that had been pretty much overlooked in the industry. But there is nothing more steady and more predictable than the cash flow from test and inspect. Contracts, not just the time and material that typically has been billed out to customers. If you have a service agreement and it calls, let's say, for 2 visits a year for testing and inspection and any other work that you may do, that has a value. And we've seen other companies, not the majority of them, but some of them, paying full value for the test and inspect, because if you think about it, the profitability typically on test and inspect would be about the same as what you would earn on monitoring contracts. So what some of these buyers are doing is just blending the two types of contracts together. And if it's recurring monthly revenue, they pay the same multiple for everything. Now, that also may preclude a somewhat lower price with everything included in it, but you still come out ahead. The other way of doing it is test and inspect might be at a lower multiple, say 18 to 24 times, or somewhere thereabouts, depending upon the profitability you have in that. But it's a very stable form of revenue, stable form of income. I urge you, if you're in the fire business, keep building it. It's a good business. Does that answer your question, Brian?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Come on, Alan, you want to know how much your company's worth? Millions.
Alan's muted.
Oh, unmute Alan. I can't hear you. You're muted. Can we unmute Alan?
There.
Alan? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Ron, if these more or less lower multiples that you're talking about here in the mid 30s, say, with a maximum of like high 30s or 38 or something, are because of COVID. You know, obviously this could be just an intermittent time, or do you think this is just a structural change?
Oh, I think good question, really good question. I think it is a structural change. I think it's and this is one of the decisions you're going to have to make as a businessman, and that's deciding when there is a quantum shift in the industry that you need to be aware of. And if the price is going a little bit lower, not a lot, but a little bit lower, what that may mean is that there's less confidence in the stability of the cash or the cash flow to an alarm company in the future. And when that happens, you wind up having some pressure on the pricing of accounts. Large numbers of accounts will always garner the highest multiple. Reasonable attrition or low attrition, always going to garner the highest multiple. So if you've got good contracts, you have relatively low attrition, and you have priced your product correctly, you're going to get a better multiple than somebody who's just may have a few hundred accounts, maybe not have good contracts. The industry has a resource, and I don't get paid anything for publicizing this. Ken Kirschenbaum talks enough about it that I don't have to. But what he does is provide a really good product and a way of contracting your business, all elements, including the fire side, that make sure that when you do go to sell, you have good contracts and they will stand the test of due diligence. Is that responsive to your question?
Yeah, I Ron, I also want to just make one comment about one of the things you said. You know, if sellers are worried about their employees ending up with another company, I would say that number one, it's very hard to get employees today, as everybody knows. And I would say some of that we've done about 15 acquisitions over 30 years. And the best ones we did, as we look back, are ones where we did get employees because they could then continue the growth in that area. And that's what you want to do. You want to buy something and then you want it to continue to grow. Otherwise, there's attrition. So I would say any good acquirer is going to recognize if you have good employees, boy, those are very valuable items. That's all I wanted to say.
And it's always true. We're closing on another transaction Tuesday. It's a company that has about 2,000 accounts, and they also have a locksmithing business. And they have found that the locksmithing business provides more leads than any other source of what they do. And everybody that I've ever talked to in the alarm industry says you don't want to buy a locksmithing portion of the business. Frankly, that's the first thing I would buy, because at some point, and you're nodding your head, Lois, it's logical. You have so many people coming in or calling that need keys or need their car started or need something that a locksmith carries, that all you have to do is at the end of the installation, hand them a brochure and say, we do just as good a work in our alarm division. And you're going to get a lot of leads. And this company that I'm talking about has low attrition. And by low, I believe it's somewhere in the gross attrition of 9%. And that's a pretty good number in today's market. So I would urge you to talk to financial people if you can, accountants if you can, but most importantly, call a quality broker who can help you do what you need to do. The most important aspect of a sale, keep this in mind, is who knows the most buyers. It's like in real estate. The best brokers are the one who know the most developers and bankers and so forth, and can really help the customer. The same thing in this business. We have I would say a list of potential buyers that is second to none anywhere in the world. I think it allows you to be assured that there will be a good source of buyers when you are ready to sell. And I can tell you that number has remained the same consistently for the last 20, 25 years.
Good.
Any other questions?
Ron, I'll throw in there, one of the comments that you made at the end of the presentation was, run your business like a business. And I can tell you that is surprisingly, it's amazing that people don't understand that. And it's amazing how many you find are not doing that. They get into the business because either they've left someplace or they've moved on, or they've seen what they think is, oh, the owner's getting rich, I can go get this on my own. And they don't understand the cost and the obligations involved. And they end up, we saw it in the association world over the last, 16, 18 months. The companies who struggled during COVID were the ones that weren't positioned as businesses. They were positioned kind of as working for wages, if you will. The companies that were structured well, that were able to adapt, came through it maybe even better than they went into it. So I'm sure that a lot of people look at that question or that point on your slide and they shake their head like, well, of course you're going to do that. I don't know that of course is part of that. It was very surprising to see the way the last year and a half has played out. And that is absolutely right dead center of where a lot of that has come from.
Boy, that is so important, Dale, and the fact that you bring it up is even more important. This is the kind of advice that association members need from their leaders or from the association directors. People who have had business experience, know how to run a business, know how to help people. If I were a member of your association, the first call I would make tomorrow is inviting you to be on my board of directors, because think about it. Who knows as much about what's going on in the industry in Ohio as the director of an association. I don't know if your contract allows that, but I couldn't think of anybody better to help people than you.
I'm so glad I record these calls, just endorsements like that, just you can't pay enough for them. So
Now he's gonna go on TV, Ron. This is
Hey, he's entitled to it.
uh,
I have watched Dale and Paula work harder than any two people had any right to be asked to do. They have done everything necessary to build the associations they represent. They are the best. And you guys are very lucky to have.
thank you very much for saying that.
It's truth. I wouldn't say it otherwise. Any other questions?
Ron, if I may, I just want to make a comment
Sure.
that you were referring to a moment ago when you were talking about numbers of buyers and sellers, but just in the short couple of weeks since I have joined you and rejoined this part of our industry, I have had multiple phone calls and folks reach out on LinkedIn and just get in contact with me. And I will tell you, we were talking about the list of buyers that we already have and that we already work with and are known and trusted. The conversations that I've had in the last few days are buyers that are coming out of the woodwork. It seems that they are saying, I know that there are businesses that are like mine and I would love to be able to grow through acquisition. And I will tell you, there are a lot of very, very impressive buyers that I didn't even know would be buyers before a week ago. So certainly good thing for sellers. It's good for our market. I think it's good for our industry as a whole. And hopefully with more buyers, we will see some of the slowdown from COVID in multiples. We'll see that start to move back up in the direction that all sellers would like to see. So, but just wanted to comment on that because I've been very, very pleased with some really great conversations in the last couple of weeks.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Kelly. Can I tell one story before we leave, Dale?
Absolutely.
Okay. All my stories are true, and I've lived them. This story started in Florida. A dealer who has a good business, just a great business, and it was worth probably $12-13 million 10 years ago when he first called us. And he kept insisting it was worth 13 or 14 or 15. In fact, one point he thought it was going to be worth 20. And he would never listen to the numbers he was responsible for managing. Well, after all these years, a new player came into the industry. I knew who was representing this player. I don't think very many other people in the industry knew. And I knew that the business that this alarm dealer had in Florida would be exactly the right fit for my friend down there. And as of yesterday, Steve Rubin closed that sale for a significant amount of money, exactly though what the company was worth. And everybody is happy with it. So sometimes it takes a bunch of years. Usually it takes a couple of months, but there's always a buyer for every company out there. And with that, Dale, I thank you for having me. And the
So-
next time around, I hope you invite Kelly and Dave to come back and do a double whammy for you. They're terrific.
Absolutely. So just again, thank you very much for agreeing to do this. Couple housekeeping things just to make everyone aware of. We do have another webinar scheduled in June. We're working on the topic right now, so keep an eye on our website, secureohio.org. for those who maybe had someone in your company that maybe you wanted to have them hear this presentation, but they weren't able to attend. We will be posting an edited version of this recording to our website with maybe some of the sidebar conversations edited out, just to keep it, keep it PG rated. And beyond that, we do have some training classes coming up. We have, as I said, a meeting coming up in June. So there's a lot going on in Ohio. SecureOhio.org is your point of contact for that. If you need anything, obviously check the website and call the office. Other than that, I'll leave it with Alan. Anything you want to wrap up with, Alan?
No, I just want to thank Ron for this great seminar. So he just gave you so many nuggets here of wisdom. And I'll just add one more, is that this idea of, and I remember hearing this, I think from Ron, probably 20 years ago, where he said, every single day you should run your business as though you want to sell it tomorrow. And then at first you say, why would you do that? Well, it's because if you get a contract, make sure your contracts are up to date. Get a contract on every customer. It's one of the first things they look for. And just make sure that you have low attrition. And just as they said, run it as a business. And then when it's time to sell, you'll be ready to sell. It's not like, oh, we're going to have to scramble to get ready. No, if you run your business that way every day, you'll be ready. So thank you. Thank you.
And Alan, I just want to show you this. I lost my medical alert bracelet somewhere a couple of years ago, and I replaced it. Instead of the disease that they were referring, I just used the initials CD. It happens I have a rare disease called, boy, I don't even know what it's called anymore, cholinesterase deficiency. If they put something in my blood that doesn't match, it puts me into paralytic shock. So
Wow.
instead of a medical alert bracelet, I put this one out. It says CD, and that also means the common denominator of success is doing the things that failures don't like to do.
It's so true.
Take care, my friends.
Wow.
Okay. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much. Everyone have a good day. Unfortunately, you have to go back to work now.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Hi, y'all.